Good morning, everyone. It's Lynn and Emma here for the Bookkeeping Tips for Franchisees webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you can hear and see us both, and also our slide share that we have there available for you just to prompt as we work through it, our webinar this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have any issues, any questions, you will find there is a chat box which you can put your questions in, and as soon as we get the opportunity, we'll be able to answer those questions for you. Just from a technical perspective, we put you, if you don't mind, we put you all on mute, because there are quite a few of you joining us this morning, and we just want to make sure that the sound works really well. So if you do join us and then you find yourself your mute switched off, I do apologise in advance. So Emma and I will be talking to you this morning, and if I just explain that this is one of a series of webinars that we are doing for franchises on a whole range of financial management topics. So we will tell you a little bit more at the end about some of the other sessions which are available, which you can participate in for free to get more knowledge around your financial management aspects of your business. So I think our next step is probably to introduce ourselves properly to you, and then we will get stuck into the webinar for you. So I'm Lynn Moffat. I used to be a franchisee myself. Very positive experience it was too of being a franchisee, and we gained lots of knowledge and experience of running a business that way. We bought into a bookkeeping franchise, so we built lots of knowledge and expertise around bookkeeping, and we've worked with many different types of businesses over the last 6 years. I'm now an independent business owner of a bookkeeping practice, and we work with businesses of all shapes and sizes, helping them with their bookkeeping, from those that we do everything for them to those that will do quite a lot themselves, and we'll support and train them to do it themselves as well. So it very much depends on the business owner as to how much or how little of the bookkeeping process that they like to do. So I'm going to introduce you to Emma.
Morning, everybody. My name is Emma Austin. I am an accountant by training. And until 8 years ago, I'd worked mostly or exclusively inside businesses. First of all as a branch accountant, and then a financial controller, and finally as a finance director of a mid-sized group. And then 8 years ago, I set up my own independent business, which is when I became a single parent, so perhaps a crazy decision in hindsight. And here we are 8 years later, business has grown steadily each year. I would say that for me, it's been quite a learning process, going from big corporate to really tiny micro business, completely different environment and lots to learn. And now the business has got 7 staff, and although we do a lot of compliance work, so tax returns and things, I tend to do more of the coaching and mentoring work and the tax advice work, rather than just churning through year-end accounts. So I'm a bit more client-facing than perhaps some accountants. So we said today is all about bookkeeping tips for you as franchisees. So we make a start on that. The most important area, I think, is at the start to decide how you're going to keep your books and records. So it's a conscious decision on your part. You could use a software package, you can use Excel, and some people would still use manual books and records. You need to bear in mind that HMRC have an initiative called Making Tax Digital, which from April 2019 will mean any VAT registered business or business at the VAT threshold has to submit quarterly tax returns. So like your end of year tax return, but quarterly. And it's anticipated that that's going to apply to all businesses shortly thereafter. So what that means is, if you're used to doing it on a spreadsheet or manually, you probably are going to need to move over to a software system, although the exact details of this are still not clear from HMRC. So So that's something you definitely need to bear in mind. Probably over and above that, you need to choose something that is going to do what you want for your business. It's got to work for you. So we tend to work with a package called Xero, spelled Xero. There are other packages, Free Agent, QuickBooks, Cashflow. There are lots of them. But really it's about what works for you and what works in your franchise. So I would be talking to your franchisor, I would be talking to other franchisees, and perhaps have a chat with an accountant as well. Although I find lots of our clients get on very well with Xero, I have to say that occasionally we come across a client that it doesn't work for. So I would also hedge your bets. If you decide what you want to do, maybe go for a free trial. Most of these packages will offer you a free trial for a month, just to see if it does work for you, and see whether it works for you to have it on your phone or your laptop, and the way that you can scan in receipts. For some of you, you might find that works very well. You can do it in between classes and appointments just to keep track of your expenditure. But it's important to try it. I think you have to make sure whatever you're using, it is user-friendly and it's actually going to help you to run your business. Now, I was trained in the Years of Sage, an older accountancy and bookkeeping package. What I'd say about the newer packages is that the business owners tend to like them and they tend to feel it helps them in running their business. Lynn, I know you work a little bit more closely on the bookkeeping side. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you think the main benefits you've seen for clients who are now using a bookkeeping software as opposed to spreadsheets and even manual systems?
Yeah, there's been a few things actually. I think one of the really important benefits is the flexibility of access. So the softwares that we're talking about here are internet-based. So you can log in from your phone, your tablet, your laptop. If you're on holiday, it doesn't really matter where you are. So it gives you loads of flexibility. You know, so if you're one of those people that's out and about as a business owner, you can be doing things on the go between appointments, between classes, and it really helps you be time efficient. I think that's one of the great elements. One of the other aspects is the level of automation in softwares as well. So unlike some of the older bookkeeping packages, you can set things up so a lot of the regular transactions will repeat or will reconcile really quickly and easily. So that's really good as well. And I think as well, lots of business owners that have found softwares like this have really got really into it and quite excited about them, whereas maybe they haven't previously. So if they are able to do things much easier, you know, like invoicing or issuing receipts or keeping on top of who owes them money, then that makes their business life easier. So it's not just then about doing the bookkeeping on a software, getting a whole range of other benefits that go with it that make your business life a bit easier and save time. That leads nicely on to the next question. So the next element really of bookkeeping, once you've got your software, is making sure that you've actually got time to use it properly. And I've lost count of the number of business owners that we've come across over the years that just don't like bookkeeping, don't necessarily prioritise it. There's so much going on in their business, one, that they would rather be doing, and two, that is really top priority as well as their bookkeeping and their financial management. So it is a bit of a challenge for people. So although, you know, I think we all like to think that we're pretty disciplined people, there are always elements of our business that perhaps we're not as focused on as others, you know. So social media might be one of mine, for example. So we've all got those areas of our business that we're less on top of, if you like. So with the bookkeeping, to stop it building up and to getting really out of control, setting some time aside each week really does help. Booking that time in the diary, making sure that it's time when you know that you are actually going to be able to use that time to work on your bookkeeping. Perhaps when it's a little bit quieter, Perhaps it's in between classes, perhaps it's in an evening, perhaps it's at a weekend when, you know, the children are out doing something. But getting on top of that and getting a routine really will help. So that will mean then that you don't get behind, because that's when you can start to feel the pressure, start to have this nagging feeling at the back of your mind that there's something that you really should be doing, and there's something that's not being done that you're worried about. So I think if you're one of those people, maybe who finds it a little bit more difficult to find the discipline around this, then, you know, set yourself reminders. That might be in your Outlook calendar, or it might just be post-it notes everywhere. Maybe set yourself a reward for doing it, for when it's done. And I suppose, you know, reminding yourself that actually it is a critical part of your business. And if you're running a serious business, it is a really important discipline to have. So keeping on top of your bookkeeping, really important, making that time. And if this is something that maybe you struggle with a little bit, completely understandable. I think we've all been there. But maybe just take a couple of minutes now just to write down, when do you think you could commit each week to doing that bookkeeping and paperwork and getting on top of it? So if you've got some paper to hand, just make a note of it, and then hopefully that'll stay with you and you'll go away from this session and go and put that in your diary.
So far we've talked about getting the setup right in terms of choosing the software and getting your time set aside each week to do what you need to do on your bookkeeping. When you've done those two things, the next thing that you need to do is actually set up the bookkeeping system that you've chosen. And there are two very distinct elements to that. The first one is to set out the layout of your accounts. Now, what you should find as a franchisee is that your franchisor can offer you guidance and structure on how to set out the accounts for a business like yours. I would also say it is still your business, and you want to make sure that you can see what you need to see to run your business. If you only put scattered thoughts into your bookkeeping, I think what you'll tend to find is what you get out is fairly mundane. And what I would like to see is that what you get out of your accounts actually is so genuinely interesting that you can't wait to meet with your accountant or your bookkeeper, because you get to see how your business is growing, how the different types of sales are growing relative to each other on a month-by-month basis. You can also see how much profit you're making, and even more importantly, how to increase the profit that you're making. That is what good bookkeeping should do for you. So it's really important to start from the beginning and think, how should we set this up? What different types of sale should we have in our account for the different classes or events or products that we're selling? And what different types of cost should we be seeing as well? So for me, that's the most exciting side of setting up your accounts. However, there's also another side which is as important, and that's ensuring that the financial settings are correct. And I have to say, this is where I see using a bookkeeping system can go wrong. So you have to put your year end in, you have to put your VAT settings in, and if you have opening balances, you need to put those in. It might sound terrifying. It might sound like that is just definitely something that you would want someone else to do. It might be that you want some guidance in it. But I would say you just make sure you've got that right. And if you're worried at all, if you're on something like Xero, you can just phone your bookkeeper or your accountant, and they can log in at the same time as you, and they can just help you do it. They can talk you through it screen by screen. It really isn't a huge job, but it is important to get it right. And what we find is that if we have clients who rush that, they get 3 or 4 months down the line and then they get quite frustrated with the system that they're using. So once you've chosen your system and you've decided how you're going to do that bookkeeping on a weekly basis, definitely set aside a block of time to get the setup spot on and to use help if you need it. Time invested at this stage is going to reap rewards down the line, on and on and on and on. what you might find is in year 2, in year 3, you're still using the same systems you set up at the start. So that's our third tip for you today. Let's move on now. I'll hand back over to Lynn.
Okay, so training and support. And I think as business owners, and I know this myself, there are always areas of the business where you need a bit of training, a bit of support. For me, we outsourced our IT support. We've outsourced our social media because I wasn't particularly consistent or particularly, good at it. So there are always elements like that in your business. Now with bookkeeping, there's a whole range of support out there, should you wish to access it. So firstly, your franchisees. So there'll be other people just like you, very similar businesses, that you can ask. And I know when I was within a franchise, it was fantastic because you have that level of support, and you can find out that people are really good at other things and see if they can help you or point you in the right direction. Also worth asking your franchise head office as well. They may have particular support or guidance that they can give you or to direct you to as well. If you have an accountant or a bookkeeper, again, great people to ask directly for advice on getting your bookkeeping set up and how to get it right from day one. It's really important that you need to know you're doing it correctly. We so often come across business owners who've been doing their own bookkeeping, and quite often they want obviously to build their knowledge. A big part of that is actually the confirmation that they have been doing it correctly and knowing if there's something they're missing or something that they should be doing differently. And it's just having that that real reassurance from the outset. So that might apply to you if you're new as a franchisee, or it may apply to you if you're actually an established franchisee. And it's something that you feel that you would like to know more about or have a bit more reassurance about. So quick question for Emma really, as an accountant, what are the areas where you find the clients need the most advice and support in terms of their bookkeeping?
So generally, I would say it's around the setup. If clients can have the right setup, then generally they can tick along, and then we'll hear from them. Perhaps if they've got a query, so they're trying to post a particular transaction onto their system, and they just, the system won't do it, it's not coming out as I want, and then we log in and help them. So it's mainly around the setup. We get a few ongoing queries, but the other thing that we are doing a lot for clients now are quarterly reviews or monthly reviews. So it's just like you said, it's people who are actually genuinely interested as to how their business is doing. Is it healthy? Is it growing? Is it doing what they want it to? And they're just looking for someone who's qualified and experienced to review it, and just to give them a few pointers on a routine basis. So really it's those two areas, the initial setup and then sort of scheduled reviews to help them to grow their business.
Great, thank you for that, Emma. So as I say, I think it's something that we all experience now and then. We all need help with particular things. So we're going to move on to our next tip, and I'll hand you back to Emma for that.
So this has to be one of the most asked technical questions. I get clients and even not clients phone and say, oh, can I claim for this? So I thought it was worth talking you through some of the basic principles here. So two overarching principles. For an expense to be claimable, it needs to be wholly and exclusively for the purpose of your business. An example of something which is not always wholly and exclusively for the purpose of your business would be food. Your breakfast today, probably not wholly and exclusively for the purpose of your business, but if you had to go away on a training course and you needed lunch, well, perhaps that's wholly and exclusively for the purpose of your trade. So the first thing is it wholly and exclusively, or is there another purpose? So another example is, say training. If you're a yoga instructor, maybe you want to do a training course to deepen your knowledge of yoga. That would be wholly and exclusively for your business. But if that training course is taking place in Thailand, we might have to have a chat about in what way that's wholly and exclusively for your business. So that's your number one rule. Your number two rule is whether it's a revenue expense, as in, is it something that gets used up in the month or the year, or is it a capital expense? Now that's not as complicated as it might sound. A revenue expense is something like rent, salaries, even interest costs on any loans that you've got. What isn't, it's probably fairly obvious. It's things like if you buy a car or business premises, because they're not all used in the year or the first 2 years of purchase. So those are your two overarching principles. Got to be wholly and exclusively. It's got to be a revenue expense. If it's capital, you might get something very technical called capital allowances, which please speak to an accountant if you're going to claim those. And also just be careful about entertainment and gifts. They're generally ones that you need to seek advice on. Entertainment is generally not claimable. So with those background ideas, then if it is a claimable expense, you should really be getting invoices and receipts for that expenditure. And if you are VAT registered, you have to have a proper VAT receipt in order for you to claim the VAT element back on that expense. So it's got to be wholly and exclusively, it's got to be a revenue expense, and it has to be supported by some sort of documentary evidence. What you have to think is that we should, all of us, expect to have some sort of HMRC inspection once we're in business for ourselves, once every 7 years. Now, I don't know what you're all like, but I find it quite hard to actually remember exactly what my business was spending money on 7 years ago. I have vague memories. But if you've got the documents and you have an inspection, it's just evidence, and you can say to HMRC, please come in, inspect us, because we have all the evidence there. It's very different if you're there thinking, oh, why did we do that? What was that we spent our money on? In terms of whether you're claiming everything, which is a really common question, I think this is where speaking to other franchisees, your franchisor and your accountant can help you. Typically, one of the things we get asked about a lot are costs such as home office expenditure, travel, cars and mileage. These are areas just to have a quick chat with your accountant, perhaps jot something down now on an email so that you can send it over to me and I can pick up the phone, we can have a chat about that. There's lots of HMRC guidance, it does change year on year, but in principle, I would be saying keep tabs on everything that you spend for your business and then speak to your accountant and say, well, was that in fact claimable? So clothing, uniforms, telephone, broadband, marketing costs, these are all things to be jotting down in your books and records to bring to the attention of your accountant at your year end. So just before we move forward, if there's anything there that you would like to ask me about, please just jot it down now. And at the end of this webinar, just send it over to me and I can follow up with you individually. So let's move on then to the next top tip, which is with Lynn.
Okay, so we've been talking about the importance of doing your bookkeeping regularly. So for some of you might be doing it daily, you might be doing it weekly, you might be doing it fortnightly. Very much depends on your schedule and how you work. And with all the really good softwares that we've been talking about, they very much lend themselves to that, so that you're actually literally right on top of it on a day-by-day or a week-by-week basis. So if you are working in that way, it can be quite often that people will lose sight of kind of a month-end process. And a month-end process is really useful for just making sure that you really have done everything that you should for that month's worth of bookkeeping. So things like you know, actually going through and making sure that you've got everything on. So have you put all your income in? Some of your income might come in via another system that you use, or it might be that you have to enter that sales information yourselves. Have you put all the bills on that you've received for your business? Receipts? Maybe there are things that you've bought for your business personally that need to be claimed back as an expense claim. So you can have your own little list of things that you need to make sure that you've actually gotten there, particularly things that you are invoiced regularly for. So if you're regularly paying for hall hire for certain locations or rent, you know, you always need to make sure that you've ticked those off, because they would always be things that you would have within your bookkeeping. So once you've got everything in, the next most important thing to do is to make sure that everything is reconciled against your accounts. So that might be your bank accounts. So most of you will have a business bank account. Some of you may have more than one business bank account. Typically a business savings account will accompany a business current account. You may have a credit card for your account. You may have cash. You may have petty cash. You may take income via a PDQ system like Stripe or WorldPay, for example. So with all of those things, you need to make sure that they are reconciled back. So if you take a statement as an example, everything on your bank statement should be reflected within your bookkeeping. If you are using a system, it's very easy to do that. If you're not using a system, then it will be a case of having those bank statements printed off and ticking them off and making sure that everything is in there. So as well as doing that, you then need to make sure that your bank balance at the end of each month in your system and on your bank statement says exactly the same. And again, with a lot of the lovely softwares, they really help with that. And they'll have a bank feed that's utilised. But you should always check it back against a physical statement, so you can make sure that it never gets out of sync. The next thing I'd highlight is running key reports. So if you're using a software, they'll be very simple to run reports that you can look at. And they're there to give you information about what's going in your business. And you can use these to sense check to make sure that you've got everything in. So for example, if you run a simple profit and loss report, then this should show you month by month all the income that you've had in your business. And this might be split into different types of income. As Emma was saying earlier, you can tailor your system to give you information that you find valuable. It'll also show you all your different types of expenditure. So if you're looking at that on a month by month basis, you can very easily see if there's something missing. So if for 1 month there isn't any room hire or there isn't any telephone bills in there, by running that report, it's identified for you that actually there was more information that you should have put in for your bookkeeping that month, and then you can go and rectify that. Looking at your profit and loss obviously also gives you information about what's going on in your business. So it's really important to look at that and use it for your business. So you may spot trends. You may say, look at that particular line of income and say, okay, I can see that seems to be declining. Is there a reason for that? Or, wow, this income's really going up massively. How can I make the most of that? Because that's an area of my business which is really doing well. So using that information and helping you to make decisions about what you do in your business, and doing this on a month by month basis means you can take action straight away. Whereas if you've left your bookkeeping till the end of the year, you've got a huge pile of receipts. You can't see any of that. Other couple of reports to run would be your age debtors and your age creditors reports. So this would be a report that shows you who you need to pay. So bills that you've received that aren't yet paid. And the other report would show you your list of customers who've not yet paid you, so that you then know to chase. So there are lots of other reports that you could run, and that very much depends on the complexity of your business. But as a minimum, I would run those 3 reports, see if they make sense, and use them to check that you've done everything that you need to. As part of your month-end process, noted on there we've got journals. Again, depends on your business, and it will depend very much whether you would do that yourself, or it might be a bookkeeper or an accountant that may well do those journals for you. Very much depends on the nature of your business. So that would be a question very much for your accountant to ask them about. Okay, so month-end process, really important. Can't emphasize it enough. And really, you know, running those reports and using it to really reflect on how your business is going. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide, I think.
So we've covered some key areas that are really important for getting your bookkeeping done well. You really need to decide what's going to work from you and how much support you're going to need. You have to choose between just getting on and doing it yourself, and that works for some people, and it works really well because they're super involved in every little thing that happens in their business, and you get to monitor your profit and loss as you go along. Other options are to do it yourself and to get someone check in with you, maybe monthly or quarterly, and just check how it's going and make any corrections, and someone who can chase you and say, oh, you know, I think you might have missed your telephone costs for this month, for instance. Someone who's going to read into your accounts and perhaps help you to read into them as well. Finally, we have clients who also completely outsource their bookkeeping, and that works well for people who are brilliant at what they do, say teaching drama, and they really don't feel that they want to be involved in the bookkeeping. Now, they still get involved in looking at reports and talking about profit and loss, but they're not actually keying in individual transactions. It is an individual choice. It depends on your skill set. It depends on the size of your business and also the costs for the support that you're looking for. What we tend to see is that the bigger businesses get, the more likely they are to either employ someone to do the bookkeeping or to outsource it. However, it's not always the case. We have some new starts who start off by outsourcing the bookkeeping because they know what they want to be doing, and it's not doing bookkeeping. I would say on that front, have a chat with different bookkeepers, have a chat with different franchisees, see what other people are doing in your industry and how they make it work well. So I'll just hand back to Lynn for the next slide.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our slides, and this is the opportunity really for you guys to ask your questions. If you have any questions, please do go and put them in the chat box now for us. We have got a question in here now, which I'm going to nicely pass back to Emma, if she's happy to. So we have a question on here. Hi, I started my franchise April last year and didn't do any bookkeeping. Now in year 2. When does my bookkeeping start for this tax year? I'm not vatable, by the way. So Emma, could I ask you to take that one?
Yes, so the franchise started in April last year. I think we're saying April 2017. So we've now been running it for a year. So if you've been a sole trader for that period, you'll have a tax return that currently needs preparing, and it will need submitting by the 31st of January 2019, and any tax due will need paying by then. So if your franchise has been running for a year and you've done no bookkeeping, I would be passionately advising you to get up to date, because as dreadful as that sounds, if you do the bookkeeping now in April, you're only looking back 12 months, and that's not as bad as waiting until January and then trying to catch up. That's a really long time to look back. Also, you're going to have tax to pay potentially in the January, and it's much nicer to find out now that you're going to have tax to pay in January than to do it on the 31st of January and find out then. So your year 2 would generally start, if your franchise started, say, 6th of April 2017, then the year 2 will start a year later on the 6th of April 2018. So if you're using a bookkeeping system, what you can do is start year 2 on Xero or QuickBooks from that date and start doing the bookkeeping for this April, and keep bang up to date. And then as a separate exercise, go and get your history up to date as well. Just a little note of caution is that although as a franchisee, you probably know that you're not VATable because you know the VAT threshold, sometimes when we do these catch-up exercises, we're left discovering that actually that business has passed the VAT threshold. So if you're anywhere near the VAT threshold, and even if you're not, I would be saying definitely keep an eye on your turnover, because it's dreadful to find out at the end of a year that you crossed the threshold 6 months ago, because actually you need to backdate the registration and there's VAT to pay. So Maria, if you've got any more questions or you want to talk through anything more specific on that, feel free to get in touch, and we can pick up after the end of the webinar.
Great, so we have one more question. How do we account for the costs of a home-based business? I'm in the field a lot, but also use a room of my house for storage and preparation, plus also all admin. How much of the cost of my home can I consider as a business expense?
I guess that's another one for me. Home office costs can be done one of two ways. So there are simplified expenses you can claim, or there are actual expenses you can claim. Now the simplified ones are on HMRC's website, and they're based on the number of hours that you work at home. Anyone who wants me to send them the links to that, if they get in touch at the end of the webinar, I will send you links over. They're not very generous amounts. It amounts to about £200 of expenditure per year that you can claim. But you don't need to provide full receipts and backup. You just need to have some sort of a log of how much you work at home. So that's one thing you can do. Now the alternative to that is to claim an apportionment of your actual home office costs. Now the home office costs that you can consider can be the fixed costs, which might be rent, council tax, utilities, and there might also be some ongoing running costs like telephone, broadband, and things that vary quite markedly depending on the usage. So just to give you a high-level summary, what is worth doing if you work at home a lot is actually itemising those costs for a year, which sounds a bit of a headache. It's not that bad. What you can do is, if all of that expenditure goes through one bank account at home, you can just download a CSV file of that bank account and just itemise the relevant costs that, I can send you a list of if you want. And then we have to apportion those over the basis that you're using your home. So we'd look at the extent of your trade, and the number of hours that you're using that room, and whether it's effectively used overnight for storage of records or whether it's used as a bedroom overnight, those sorts of things. And then we'd look at allocating, say, 20% of all of those home office costs to the cost of running your business. It doesn't even have to be that you work in one room all of the time. It can be done even if you're working on a dining room table for some of the time. And generally what we find is people do that proper calculation of the home office cost. There's a little bit more there that's claimable than those simplified expenses. So worth doing the exercise, maybe in the first year, and then after you've done it, hopefully you'll have some workings you can update year on year.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for that, everyone, and for your questions. That's very helpful. So just to let you know about some other webinars that we are running. We talked about one of the softwares being Xero. We mentioned there are a whole range of other softwares. But Xero is a software that both Emma and myself know particularly well and have lots of clients using. So I'll be doing a free webinar on the 18th of April from 9:30 to 10:15, where I'm literally just showing you around Xero, how it works, what it can do. So if that's of interest to you, we can send you details of how to access that as well. In terms of our next webinars, which are specifically for franchisees, there are a whole range of those coming up. So see a list that's come up on your screen. Again, we'll send this to you with the link so that you can book into any. The first two are particularly for your franchisors for the head offices. For franchisees, we've then got events from the 3rd of July around cash flow, top tax tips, and understanding your profit and loss. A whole range of different elements of free webinars for you to access. So finally, if there are any more questions that you have, please do just open your email now. Put in Emma's email address, which is emma.austin@enterprise-tax.co.uk. Just call back and hit send, or send a more detailed message about any particular help that you need. So we provide a free 15-minute telephone consultation where we can pick up on anything that's more specific and individual to you guys as well. So thank you very much for everyone for your participation. We really hope you found that useful. I'm sure there'll be some elements of that which you would know, but hopefully there are some things in there which will be things that you can take away and directly action as well. So thank you very much for your time today, and we hope to see you on one of our future webinars. Thank you very much.